Chanukah, Tafshin Yud Gimel, end of 52 going into 53. Let me just share the page. So it's that we were talking about, again, this is a Farbrengen that's kind of built on the Maamar of the Tzemach Tzedek about Chanukah, and about the difference between the Behaaloscha HaNeiros, between Aharon, who lights the candles, and Avram. The idea of the love of Aharon HaKohen is Rabba, the great abundance of love. That means that it has no limits. Not just it doesn't just mean it's a tremendous love, but it also has no limits to the character of love, which love's nature is to leave. The idea of place and nefesh, because you love, you want to go closer to God. Where the Rabba, the abundance of love, recognizes that's not about you, and it's all about what's the kavanah, what's the intention of Hashem, and which is that we should bring Dira B'Tachterim down into this world. So the idea is to take the love and actually be effective in this world, which is a sign of the Rabba. And we quoted the difference between. We asked the question also, why does it say that by Dab Hashem al Moshe Daber al Aharon? So it says Vayir Hashem al Moshe Daber al Aharon. Behaaloscha HaNeiros. Why does it say Vayomer Vaydaber? So it says that's the idea. Sorry, Daber Shem al Moshe Daber al Aharon v'Amarti Lo. So it says say to Aaron, speak to him. So why does it say Daber v'Amarti Lo? So the same idea is based on the idea of the Ten Commandments. By Seres Dibra says Vaydaber Lakim Lemor. That the Magid Mizrush says Daber Lamer means that we have to take the Seres Dibros and bring into the Asar Maamar, the 10 utterances. That the idea is to take the 10 commandments and engrave them and put them into the 10 utterances, which is the idea of the Rabba, the great love. That's why it says by Daber al Aharon v'Amarti love, speak to him and tell him, which is to take the great love and v'Amarti to bring it into the Asar Maamar, which is to bring it down into this world. Okay, that's what we're holding Siv down. It's a fascinating Farbrengen that's going to continue in this, so in and out of the Maamar. The Pratisais, the Rebbe says to explain this idea of what does it mean that Daber al Aharon v'Amarti love, and the idea is to take from the Seres HaDibros and bring it into the 10 Maamaros, the 10 utterances. It says that Pratisais to understand this better, the Rebbe says the Matan Torah Nemra, when it comes to Matan Torah, it says Daber Lakim is called Dvar Meila Lemar. The Pasuk says that Daber Lakim, God spoke all these words Lemar saying. So he says, so the commentaries ask the question, the reason why it ever says Lemar, tell the Jewish people saying, is that God speaking to Moshe that he should give over what he's saying to the Jewish people who are not standing there with Hashem listening to what God is saying. They're not there when Hashem speaks. That would apply usually. So that's why we have Lemar in every other pasuk. The problem is, or the issue is, that we keep much of Eis Matan Torah, and Matan Torah, all the Jews, not just the Jews who were alive at the Bnei Yisrael that were alive at the time, but the Bnei Yisrael that will be for all times. It says all the neshamas of all times are standing in Matan Torah. So what's the lemar? Who are we telling it to? Everyone listen. So my kavanah b'lemer. So if God is speaking to Moshe, and by Moshe, Daber Likim, God is speaking, everyone's listening. So what's the commandment to lemar to say over? So you may say, okay, so it's the people that were standing there heard it, but the next generations, but like we said, all the souls, even including, I believe, the souls of the converts, everyone was at Matan Torah. So if all the souls are at Matan Torah, so then what's the idea of what's the lemar? So the Magid is rich. The student of the Hashem teacher, the Alter Rebbe, explains, the idea of Matan Torah is the Hamshech Seres HaDibros shel HaTorah v'Mais v'Asar Maamaros shebehem Nivra Olam, is to take the 10 utterances of the Torah, the 10 Dibros, the 10 sayings of the Torah, which means the 10 commandments, and to integrate it into the Asar Maamaros, in the energy, in the 10 utterances that create the world. Meaning to say, take the beyond creation, which is what Torah is. Torah comes before the world of 2,000 years. That means Torah was before the world, and bring it into the existence of the world. Torah, which is a balabas, which rules over creation, should be integrated within creation. Like it says in the Maggid teaches on the pasuk Asara Kav the shekel hakodesh that you have 10 in the weight. Shekel is like the scales, the holy scales. So what does the 10 in the holy scales mean? It's talking about the measurements, but that Maggid says Shasara Mamoris that the 10 utterances shkulim, not in the way of a scale, but they weight or their comparison. And they're exact. Connected the Saras Dibris to correlate with the 10 commandments. That's why it says the idea is to put the 10 commandments within the 10 utterances. Again, the Farbrengen will bring down portions of the Maamar and then explain them. So therefore, though we learned last class this in short pen from the Maamar, the Rebbe is elaborating more in the Sicha, so to say, around the Maamar. What does this mean in our service of God? The Rebbe says this. Or HaTorah, Aseres HaDibros. What does it mean, the light of Torah, the 10 commandments? You can't have that your Torah life, your Torah existence, so to say, is separate from your world life. It means that the idea is that Aseres HaDibros of Torah should lahoyer, to light up in Yoni Olam, into worldly things, which was created and kept into existence by the 10 utterances. Like unlike those who think Torah is one idea and the world is another idea. Within our life, we have our, so to say, we escape for Torah and we have our reality of the world. And here the Rebbe goes into the nitty-gritty of the avodah over here. When I'm in the circles of Torah, in the people, in the gatherings, in the places of Torah, is Yehudi Teirani. So then, like when I'm in the shul, in the yeshiva, in community events, so then I'm going to be a Torah Jew, a Torah Yid, like the Rebbe says. But when I go out to the world, then what dictates? What is my, sort of say, how do I live? Not just how do I integrate, but also what decides what I have to do is the way the world looks at things. And these could be a chalice and parnasik, chalice and other things. In your bitachon, right? The world says you have to behave this way. So when I'm in the world of Torah, I'm like a Torah Jew. When I'm in the world of the physical world and material world, it's according to the rules of the physical material world. What the position and behavior of the world is. That's not the way it should be. So what is the idea of Aseres HaDibros in the Sarah Menorah? That the 10 commandments into effect within and penetrate within, permeate within the 10 utterances. Nidish miyehudi, what's expected from a Jew. Shekolinyan of everything they do, gamin yani ha'olam, even things that are seemingly worldly, yi lefi anachas Torah, is the way Torah sees it. And here the Rebbe is going to explain again. This is a Farbrengen, so the Rebbe is going to explain it in case that there shouldn't be any misunderstanding of what it means. We're not talking about obviously the forbidden things. It's clear that if it's forbidden, it's not shaila, you're not allowed to do it. Torah says you're not allowed to do it. Like the Rebbe says in Yiddish, if you can't do it, you can't do it. If it means you can't do it. The Torah doesn't allow you to do it, you're not allowed to do it. So what does it mean when the Rebbe says that you don't go according to the hanachos, to the view of the world, to the mindset of the world, but the mindset of Torah? Even the permissible. Your view of the world shouldn't be according how a balabas, so to say, or how that the world looks at it, but how Torah looks at everything, even the permissible. The Rebbe is going to give an example. Admor Sipur. So the Friedrich Rebbe tells when they lived in Rostov, when the Rebbe Rashab moved from Lubavitch to Rostov, which is in the south, I believe. So they had a 2-floor duplex and the Friedrich or apartment, and the Friedrich Rebbe lived. The Rebbe Rashab lived on the upstairs. And the Friedrich Rebbe's, he was already married by then, his apartment, was in the downstairs. So the Rebbe Rashab lived upstairs and the Friedrich Rebbe lived downstairs. was kind of, I think it was a different setup. And Lubavitch obviously was more kind of a shtetl, but this was already more of a city. And Rostov, I'm talking about. Sometimes, seemingly from Shul, the Rebbe Rashab would go into the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment, which was downstairs, and he'd make Kiddush there and have a Svadis, a Farbrengen, a gathering, civic gathering. The Echad Svadis, one of the Farbrengens, in the house of the Frierdiker Rebbe, his son, and the Rebbe Rashab is in the son, and the Rebbe Rashab is the fifth Rebbe Chabad, the Frierdiker Rebbe is the sixth Rebbe, the father-in-law of our present Rebbe. So Be'echad Basvadis, one of the Farbrengens, Amar Kvatish to Admin Shmeseiden, the Rebbe Rashab said, Al-Benoi, talking to his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe, when he referred to his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, he called him my holy father-in-law, right? He said, the Heilige Shver. He said to his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, L'chaim Balabais. Meaning to say, he simply said, if it was the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment, and the father was saying L'chaim to his son, it's his apartment, so he said L'chaim, kind of to the Balabas, to the person whose house it is. But there was also a little bit, there was an idea behind that. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, asked his father, the Aviv, from the Rebbe Rashab, then his souls in Gan Eden, he said, please take away the title of, that he called him, the Baal Habas. Baal Habas means really the person, the owner of the house, or the landlord of the person who lives in the house. But it also Baal Habas means a person who's a Baal Habas. The term Baal Habas by Chassidim was a term, is a term that's referring to a person who's kind of a worldly person, a person who's, not a national mazel, not a batlin, but a worldly person, not Baal Habas. So he says, please take away from me the title Baal Habas. Udavar Muzam, he says he doesn't like it. It's a derogatory description of the Rebbe, of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And this is the story the Rebbe says what the Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe over the story. Meaning, the Rebbe explains, here we have the Frierdiker Rebbe, who's obviously from Yid, never mind the future Rebbe. But obviously, his behavior in the house is everything is in order. You can't say that he was something that he's something wrong with him. You can't say that he had something forbidden or something not pure in his living and in his home. But still, he didn't want to be called a balabas. Because even if he, as a balabas, was a balabas who was absolutely according to Torah, had nothing forbidden and he was all pure. But the title balabas means a person who was kind of under the influence and the mindset of the world. That's the definition of a balabas. Balabas means a person who's, the idea that we say, what do the Balabatim say? Balabatim have a view of the world, not a view of Torah, a view of Chassidus. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, don't give me the title of balabas. The Rebbe says, because Chassidim really dislike, the literal translation is hate. How a balabas sees the world. So much so, I think the Rebbe is going to explain, there used to be an idea that whatever a balabas says, do the opposite. I mean, obviously, now we're talking about a question of Torah mitzvahs, about to perform a Torah, but if you ask someone what's their opinion about how to do something, if they say one thing, do the total opposite, because a balabas is not, the mindset is the mindset of the world. The Rebbe says, if Chassidim don't like to be a balabas, because eventually it's going to be that all Jews are not going to want to be a balabas. The Rebbe always said, it's quoting already from the Alter Rebbe, that Chassidus is not just for Chabadniks. Chassidus is for every Jew. As I found out the previous Rebbe said, the name of the Alter Rebbe. The teachings of Chassidus is not for any specific group. For every Jewish person. So now the Rebbe is going back to this idea. This is what happened in Matan Torah. The Pasuk said, starts off the 10 Commandments. That God spoke the words of the 10 Commandments. The idea was that we're not balabatim, that even in worldly things which are permissible, in the Asar Mamores, in the 10 utterances of Lamor, is Tiyan Hagalaya P, that it shouldn't be how things are in the world. Everything should be not the way the world sees it, but the way Torah establishes it. The idea is to bring the Torah into the world. And that was given to us. And we have the ability to do that from Matan Torah, from the giving of the Torah. That's where the pasuk starts. Speak to Aaron and tell him about the lighting the menorah. What is the idea of lighting the candle, like we said before? Is to bring it down. The Avraham expresses itself not to leave this world, but to come into this world. Therefore, it says the Hamshich is to take the 10 commandments and to bring them into the Sarah Maamar, into the 10 utterances. This was the first sikha, what we learned up until now, meaning from yesterday, from Monday, and from today in this Farbrengen of Zos Chanukah, Tafshin Yud Beis, Tafshin Yud Gimel. The Rebbe continues. This that we're talking about, what is a candle? Like it says, HaNeiros, when you light the candles. Tanya brings down, the candle of God is the soul of man. That the soul of a Jewish person, and the Jewish people are called Adam, like the Gemara says, is so the Jewish soul is like an example of a flame, of a candle that's always moving. Misnaneh means shaking or shuckling. That always wants to go above. The soul represents this unsettling feeling of the soul is like a flame. It's just always bouncing around, looking to go up, looking to leave its reality up present. He's going to explain in a second. This is what the Zohar teaches. The Zohar says, one of the reasons the Jewish people are always shaking is because, like even during davening, is because when you're davening, you're opening, your soul is, so to say, opened up, is expressing itself. And the soul is always flickering, it's always moving. So therefore the person's always moving when we daven. Believing the Torah, when we learn Torah, we shuckle. The Rebbe says that one of the things that people had against this, had an issue with the Zohar, was this idea that that's brought down about the idea of shuckling, of shaking. When you daven and shaking when you're learning is because the neshama is shaking. It doesn't say exactly what the issues were. It says in note 33, it says, look at the Shakatari B'Ibn Zed, the discussion about this. Is farm shnismanu v'aris v'sunim shivasei. In the end of the Sefer, the Baal Shem Tov quotes this. It's brought down in Tzavas Harivash, in the Tzavah, in the testimony, so to say, even though the Rambam, the Tanya says, the Alter Rebbe says it's not the actual testimony, it's not the actual will, so to say, of the Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, but it's called, these are the sayings of the Baal Shem Tov. The Rebbe said, we have to be shuckling, we have to be shaking. Two shuckling. Two shuckling is not just shuckling. Two shuckling means to position yourself, to put yourself into the mode of shaking. In any day, in Darish Indian shall nigan or rikut. I'm not sure about singing or dancing. Move. Don't be standing still. I was using it as a deeper idea. Don't just be content. When a person's content, he just moves still. Shaking is a symbol of tension, of unsettledness. A Jew should be unsettled. There should be this hazard. Move. What are you doing? Right? Don't be standing still. The Rebbe continues. Yehudi Echad, there was a Jew. The Rebbe's telling the story now. The person, the Rebbe says at this moment, still 1953, you could call that person a person who's on the outside. Meaning, not when you say that you have to bring the well springs of Chassidus to the outside, that person would be who you're talking about on the outside. The idea is to bring the well springs outside. The idea is to spread this well springs to the outside. The Rebbe says that this Jew, who was not a chassid basically, once writes to the Friedrich Rebbe, he He likes the way Lubavitch, what Lubavitch is doing, and he's a very big fan, so to say. Hatzach means he holds and appreciates the work of Chabad, of Lubavitch. When he gave the yeshivas, when it comes to the yeshivas of Chabad, etc. He says one thing he doesn't understand. Why do they shake when they learn? That's just, he never seen that. You imagine go to college, just shaking, they don't shake. Why are they shaking when they learn? The kulam tzeikum yachad, there's a kind of a balagan, they're all shouting and learning. The scene of a yeshiva. The lay say it doesn't seem to be organized. Why can't they just learn in an organized way? Everyone just sits quietly. If we listen there, don't shake. If you want to ask a question, first of all, raise your hand. He doesn't like he felt that the yeshiva system was unorganized, shaking, talking, arguing with each other. That's yeshiva. He didn't answer him. The Rebbe said that Friedrich Rebbe did not answer this Jew on the question, and the Rebbe says usually that Friedrich Rebbe did answer. This is one of the things he did not answer. The Rebbe is not telling us why he didn't answer, but he says he didn't answer. And the Rebbe says, "V'sayim going to Shmar Ad Mishlit." The Rebbe finished, and the Rebbe said, "Tzirchem liyas hazatzmus." You have to have a shake, but not just an external shake, an essential shake. The shake has to penetrate all the way to your essence. And then the Rebbe started to sing a song, evidently. And the Rebbe started to sing and they started to dance. He stopped and he said, they say the story. There was once a Farbrengen, a gathering. Okay, this is a Farbrengen. And one of the beautiful things about learning Teres Menachem is that you learn the Farbrengen as it happened, not just the Torahs of it, but the whole kind of takes us to the Farbrengen. We Farbrengen with the Rebbe. So the Rebbe was dancing and the Rebbe was singing. The Rebbe said that they say in Lubavitch that once they reeked to his father, Lubavitch, they were dancing at a Farbrengen Lubavitch, till almost the ceiling lifted up. The Balkan hat sich gehoben. The ceiling lifted up. It's like the expression says that just pockets separated. What's the idea? That the roof, so to say, lifted up from the energy of the Farbrengen. The Rebbe explains in the idea of Chassidus. The Rebbe says that a gag, the roof is, we know the roof is what closes in the house. Halachically, is when you're talking about this difference between a chutzner that's an open, if you have walls that's open, it's obviously not the same thing as walls that are closed, meaning closed on top. It's not a house if it's not closed on top. So the Rebbe says a gag hu maka barachik, the gag, the roof makes the external, the encompassing, the energy, the distant encompassing energy, meaning we know this premise, things that you eat internally, like food. So that when you eat food or drink, so that gives chayis, that gives life, vitality to the person. It gives dambas, that becomes part of your blood and your flesh and your muscle. But then that's called a pnim. That helps a person internally. But then you have the market. We learned this many times. You have the external coverings like clothing, which is made to fit, which is called maket hakorev. It's covering. It's on the outside of the person. You can't eat the clothing, but it fits the person. Then you have maket hakarachik, the encompassing, which is a distance, which is like a home, which is it's an encompassing space, but it's not made to fit. It's not like clothing. Two people can't wear this clothing at the same time, hopefully. Two people can't, etc. But when you're in a house, a whole bunch of people could be in there. So it's called the maket hakarachik. It's an encompassing space, but it's from a distance. But what makes it the maket? What's the final? You have to have the roof. You have no roof, it's an open space. We know that there's a certain energy, a certain point. The encompassing that's from a distance, that's from an outsider, it's more outside. It comes from a higher level. Therefore, it can't even be made to fit, which is a lavush, a makav akorev. A closer one is like clothing. We said the ace also, if you mean the sun, because the clothing are made according to fit per the person. Like what size do you have? The length, width, size, etc. Large, medium, small. That's much more limited. It only fits one type of person. But even an encompassing energy, which is from a distance, like a house, which could fit anyone in there. The house doesn't have to have a limit to your height, hopefully, or your size. But nevertheless, it still only has, it's limited. It's not limited like clothing, but still limited. What does it mean that the roof lifted up when they dance? What does it mean to shuckle? The Rebbe says you have to shake in an essential, reach your atzmis, reach your essence, to be such it has such an effect. That even the far out limitations of an encompassing space of a home, which is much more rachik distance, so to say, than the encompassing space of clothing, even that breaks its boundaries. That's how much of a shake a person has. That even the space of a home, which kind of could fit anything, you have a lot of room to maneuver, much more room to maneuver than clothing. Still, that is too confining, and that breaks as well. And the Rebbe was in a very Levitic way, meaning to break out of our boundaries. That it was Ramas Kveklisha, which the Rebbe expected and asked the Chassidim, she looked at the Chayzik cases, should dance more, shuckle more, etc. And I go back a second, and maybe I missed something that started off with singing. No, it doesn't. It just went into it naturally. Okay. Let's continue. The Rebbe is continuing the Maamar. We have another few minutes. Just start the continuation. The Rebbe says, "B'Maamar Hanal," on this Maamar that we're talking about, we're learning. Let's go back to the Maamar. We spoke about that the idea is to take the Sersha Dibris and bring into the Sarah Morris. The idea of take the Ava, the love of Aharon, instead of leaving the world or bringing it down into the world. Daber Leiman. The Rebbe says to continue like this. It says like this. One could say. Again, in this narrow paragraph means that I was quoting the wording of the Maamar from the Tzemach Tzedek. We could say a hefesh bein dibris to Maamar. One difference between when you say something's at Aseret Dibris, the 10 commandments, Dibur versus Amira, just this 10 utterances. Aleph Memresh, the root of the word Aseret Maamaris, which is the 7 utterances, is the letters Amar, right? That's Amar to say, which is the 3 letters stand for Eish Ma'im Ruach, fire, water, and wind. Like it says in the Zohar, Amar is ready because it has already 3 of the 4 elements. Doesn't have offer, obviously, doesn't have earth, but it has Eish Ma'im and Ruach, fire, water, and wind. So it's the way the Hevel Halev, so to say, the sound or the power of the voice comes into a call, into a voice. It means when you say something, it comes into a voice, and it has sound. Hagorin Shemurkav Misay the Silal Kidua, which is taken from, as we're going to learn in the Menorah, or maybe even further in this Farbrengen, about the idea of, we talk about this in the Gorin, the Meitzah Gorin, and Parshas Miketz, that from the throat, when these 3 components come together, which are in the throat, then they make the sound, they call the voice. But that's the way it comes into voice. But at its root, in the soul, before it comes into the physical voice, is Dibur. So Dibur is the Koach HaNefesh, the power in the soul for communication. And the actual voice of communication is Amira, to say. We know that a person, what defines a person? A person is called a Medaber, person who speaks. Doesn't just mean that he or she is speaking, but it means that he or she can speak, which is the power to speak. And it says in the Targum, to a spirit of memale, of speaking. So it says, and then it says like this, and the power to speak, which is in the soul, is more we have a lev, takes the breath from the heart, which is that, so it gives the breath. And then it comes out to the 5 sounds of the mouth, that there's 5 different ways to pronounce the letters. Through your lips, through your tongue, through your cheeks, whatever. There's 5 ways of pronouncing sound. So once it comes into the pronunciation of sound, of letters, of the words, of the letters to make words, then it's also called dibur. So there's the voice doesn't have a specific pronunciation. There is the power to make sound, to make words, which is at the root of the soul, and then there's the actual sounds of the letters. So the Rebbe is going to say that Dibur is both the highest and the lowest level. Dibur is both the power the ability to speak, and the actual sounds of the letters. Bayomer, Amira is the voice. So there's a voice. A voice doesn't have yet any a voice is a voice, a quote. Like you even have the voice of the shofar. The voice of the shofar has no letters or sound, or vowels or different sounds of the letters. The different sounds of the loitze sapeh, it's called the 5 ways of putting together the letters. Vav is one sound. Pei is the most silent of the letters, right? So the way the power for the actual pronunciation of the letters, that's also called dibur. And this is the idea that the highest goes into the lowest, the connection, the wedging together, the tchila, which is vaydaber, the power to speak, with the actual pronunciation of the letters, not just the voice. Okay, we're going to actually stop here because this is longer and I want to be able to learn this properly. Bez Hashem will continue. I'm going to try to continue tomorrow. Bez Hashem, if not, we'll learn something maybe short on Friday and go and finish it off by Sunday, Monday into Zos Chanukah itself. Again, the Rebbe gets very emotional in this Farbrengen, in the idea of Kol Hayoim Hayeh Alikecha, etc. All right, wonderful day. Have a wonderful